Part 1. The first time it hit me, I was standing under the humming kitchen light, palms pressed into cool granite. I used to think marriage meant relentless effort, showing up every morning, choosing your person even when days were chaotic, bland, or strained. I believed commitment was exactly that, until one evening Maya met my gaze, steady, detached, and spoke words that tore through my certainty. "I don't have to make you happy." Silence snapped. At first, I laughed, surely a joke. I waited for her to soften, to wink, to tell me she'd been kidding. But her face stayed calm, grave. "We've been bickering about something trivial," her distant tone lately, her absent replies to my messages, her hushed coldness when I came home. I told her I missed the warmth we once shared. She looked at me like I was overreacting, then dropped her line. "No sugarcoat, no fluff. I don't have to make you happy." The words drained the room. I clutched the counter, knuckles whitening, heart thudding. My voice came out softer than I intended. "Then, what are we doing here?" Maya exhaled, brushing fingers at her temple as if my question weighed a ton. "Why do you act like I exist to entertain you? My life, my happiness, is mine. Your joy is your problem." Her dismissal stung. I wanted to fight back, to remind her that marriage is mutual, that it's about our shared world, not just her individual comfort. But my tongue stayed still. In that cold kitchen, I realized I'd been the only one battling for us. She'd checked out, and I felt dumbstruck that I hadn't seen it sooner. It wasn't sudden. Those small slights had piled up over the last few months. Her eye roll when I reached for her hand, her half-hearted good morning texts, her disappearing acts on my messages even as she curated posts for strangers online. The affection I drizzled over our days, post-it love notes on the mirror, remembering her go-to latte order, reminding her to drive safe, these were gestures I gave freely. When had she last paused her day to ask me how mine was? That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling's soft plaster texture. Maya lay beside me, phone screen haloing her face. She hadn't even glanced my way since her declaration. She was calm, unruffled, and I felt a rupture inside me. She'd made it clear. Snapping her fingers for my happiness wasn't in her contract. A shift ignited. I turned onto my side, watching the gentle light flicker across her eyelashes. If she believed she owed me nothing, then maybe it was time she felt the chill of my indifference. I wouldn't announce a boycott of her joy. That would be too obvious. Instead, I'd quietly step away. Morning came. Habit had me reaching for my phone, thumb hovering over the chat icon to check on her. But I didn't. I tucked my keys into my pocket, slipped out without a word. No, have a good day. No, be safe. Just the click of the door and the hum of the outside world. At the office, my phone buzzed. One message from her. "Did you leave already?" I stared at those words and felt a flush of triumph mixed with sorrow. I didn't answer. Over the next days, the routines we'd built unraveled. I stopped sending midday texts, had lunch. How's work? I declined her weekend invites without explanation. I kept my calendar busy, coffee with friends, longer hours in the studio, anywhere but home in that half-empty bed. Each dawn after that first silent departure brought fresh routines and quiet epiphanies. I noticed the kitchen clock ticking louder, the empty mug that used to hold her morning brew now sitting abandoned by the sink. The soft hum of the refrigerator downstairs sounded lonelier. My sneakers by the door no longer had the familiar echo of her knocking them to get my attention. I started half listening for her footsteps in the hallway that never came. I realized how often I'd minimized my own needs to suit hers, how my smiles had been calibrated to keep her content, and now without that, I felt both unburdened and strangely hollow. In her absence, I found space to examine my own heartbeat, unmediated by her approval or disdain. I revisited the small photo frames in our hallway, our sunlit beach trip in June, our silly grin selfie in November, wondering how long we'd been receding from scenes like those. As the days passed, the ache in my chest smoothed into resolve. If she wanted to live unbound by the promise of making me happy, then I would choose to live bound by my own promise to myself. So I kept walking forward, listening for the person I was before this all began, and hoping I would rediscover him beyond the echo of her words. Renewed. Part 2. My thumb hovered, then I smirked and locked my phone, still no reply. I'd always been the one who kept our place humming, flicking on the coffee maker before dawn, loading the fridge with her favorite snacks, whisking away stray forks and glasses from last night's dinner. I didn't do it because I had to. I did it because I wanted to. But if my joy wasn't her job, then hers sure as hell wasn't mine. That evening, Maya stepped through the door to the faint overload of dishes piled in the sink. I was parked on the sofa, headphones off, absorbed in my phone. She peeled off her bag straps. her eyes darting from the cluttered counter back to me. Seriously, she murmured. I glanced up, feigning ignorance. What dishes? I asked, voice casual. She blinked as if told by disbelief. The ones you didn't wash. I shrugged, tipping my head. I thought you'd handle it. For a moment, she just stared, jaw slack, frustration flickering in her coffee-dark eyes. Then, without saying another word, she rolled her sleeves and started scrubbing. Watching her at the sink felt like watching a playscript flip. At first, she moved slowly, curious if I'd leap up to help, but I stayed put. I let her rinse and stack every plate, every mug, until the last speck of soap bubbled away. I didn't offer a single comment or hand her a towel. Instead, I sat back, crossing one leg over the other, my expression carefully blank. As that night drifted into the next morning, I kept pulling away. I stopped firing her familiar, "How's your day going?" texts at noon. I began declining invites to weekend brunch, citing made-up deadlines I had to meet. In bed, I still slid in beside her, but my arms rested limply at my sides. No reach, no brush of fingertips. I watched her glance over, brow furrowed, as if she was puzzled by how quiet I'd become. Then came the dinner confrontation. We were at the small table, paper boxes of takeout between us. Another concession I'd made because I couldn't bear stirring saucy pots for someone who wouldn't lift a finger for me anymore. She set her fork down and said, cautiously, "Logan, you've been off." I paused mid-chew and raised an eyebrow. "Off how?" She exhaled, voice tight. "You're distant. Cold. You barely talk to me." I sipped my wine and leaned back. "I realized something," I said. Her fork hovered over noodles. "My happiness is my own problem, not yours." Her face went slack with recognition, a flashback to the words she'd used on me. She shifted, unease rippling through her. "That's not what I meant," she spluttered. I cut her off. "But it's exactly what you said." Her cheeks pinkened. "Okay, but you don't have to act like this." I let out a short, rueful laugh. "Dramatic?" I asked. "No, I'm just learning from the master." She looked down at her plate, poking at the food like it had betrayed her. No comeback. Over the next few days, I felt oddly light. I wasn't savoring midnight texts or morning smoothies together. I was tasting my own air, solo. One evening, I passed the bedroom and heard her on the phone. I wasn't eavesdropping. I just stood at the doorway, surprised. "I don't know what's wrong with him," she was saying to her friend, voice edged with worry. "It's like he doesn't care anymore." I felt a strange pulse of pity, not anger. She had never wondered if I cared. Now she did, but it was too late for declarations. She needed to prove it. I kept it simple. No dramatic ultimatums, no grand gestures of coldness. I just didn't show up the way I used to. I canceled our yearly anniversary dinner reservation with a text. "Too busy." I let her questions hang in midair. "What's wrong?" she'd ask. I'd shake my head. I no longer felt obliged to fill her silence. Then came the first real crack. One afternoon, I stepped through the front door with takeout in hand, mostly leftovers meant for one. Maya was standing there, coat half on, phone in hand. "Hey," she said, almost breathless. "How was your day?" I blinked. Years ago, she wouldn't have lifted her gaze from her screen to ask. Now there it was. Care, wrenching and unfamiliar. I shrugged and placed my bag next to hers. "Fine," I said softly, turning away. A week later, I joined co-workers for drinks after work, another habit I'd let slide. I laughed at their jokes, leaned into conversations I'd once abandoned for date night commitments. At the bar, my phone buzzed Maya. Her message read, "Are you okay? You haven't come home." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then I set my glass down and simply walked out without replying. I wasn't punishing her. I was matching energy. I wasn't eager to reclaim the caretaker role she'd discarded. I was done being the handyman for her happiness when she'd already checked out. And as I slipped into the night air, the city's clamor felt strangely comforting. A reminder that sometimes, you have to leave a quiet house behind to hear your own heartbeat again. Part 3. I didn't run it by her. I didn't ask permission, because why should I? At around 9 that night, I glanced at my phone to see 3 missed calls and a text. "Where are you?" I let them sit for a while, then replied an hour later with a single word, "Out." 15 minutes passed before she called again. This time I picked up. "Hey," I said, lifting my drink. "Everything okay?" She sighed, heavy with irritation. "Where are you?" "Still out," I replied, tone easy. "Well, when are you coming home?" I smirked into the glass. Not sure. Didn't think it mattered. Silence. I could almost hear her mind racing, fetching plans, recalculating what to do next. Before she could respond, I hung up. I exhaled and felt something I hadn't in years. Pure, unfiltered freedom. The next morning, the house smelled different. For months, I'd been the one scrambling to get us started, coffee grounds grinding, toast popping, eggs sizzling in the pan. But when I wandered into the kitchen, there was a plate of golden scramble and warm buttered toast waiting on the table. Maya stood by the stove, pretending nonchalance. "Thought I'd make you breakfast before work," she said, voice guarded. I leaned against the counter, eyeing the eggs. "Why?" She blinked, caught off guard. "Because, I don't know, I felt like it." I cocked my head. "You never cared enough to do this before." Her face went still, then flickered. "That's not fair." I fixed her with a steady gaze. "When's the last time you did something for me without me asking?" She had no answer. Both of us knew the truth. By week's end, the ripple had reached our friends. We met Sarah and our small circle at the Italian place downtown. Sarah leaned across the table toward me, eyebrows raised. "Logan, you've been awfully quiet tonight." I gave a small shrug. "Just don't have a lot to say." Sarah frowned, then looked at Maya. "Everything okay between you two?" Maya laughed, too sharp. "Yeah, totally fine. He's just swamped at work." I watched Maya's lips press together, her smile stretched too tight. No matter how loudly she forced the reassurance, I could see the knot of worry in her eyes. Later that night, the dam finally broke. We were upstairs, lights dimmed, our clothes kicked aside at the door. Maya faced me, arms folded tight across her chest. "Are you punishing me?" she demanded. I raised an eyebrow. "For what? You're so different. Distant. You don't care about anything anymore." I stepped toward her, voice low and calm. "I'm just doing what you taught me, not making my happiness your problem." Maya blinked. "That's not." "Those were your words," I said, leaning in. My voice dropped to a whisper. "Feels shitty, doesn't it?" Her eyes widened, like she'd been slapped with her own truth. She stood frozen under my gaze, realization sinking in. I had mirrored her dismissal, and in doing so, I'd handed her the mirror. And then, panic. In the days that followed, Maya tried to rewrite the script. She started with subtle gestures, slipping her hand into mine on the subway, leaning into me during late-night shows, her head resting against my shoulder when we walked past window displays. She sent midday texts. "Hope your day's going well," smiling face with smiling eyes. And, "What do you want for dinner?" She peppered them with 3 hearts and a smiling emoji. I read each one, thumb hovering, then locked the screen without replying. She wasn't actually asking for my well-being. She was testing if I'd come running like I used to. But I'd closed shop on free labor. Then came the bit of honesty I overheard. I wandered past the bedroom doorway and paused when I heard her phone voice. "I don't know what's wrong with him, like he doesn't care anymore." She sounded small, uncertain, nothing like the confident woman who once demanded I cater to her mood swings. I caught my breath and kept walking, struck by the quiet clarity of it all. Finally, her patience fractured. One evening, I settled on the couch with my phone. Maya stormed in, eyes blazing. "Are we just going to keep this up? Like strangers?" I didn't look up. "What do you mean?" She tossed her hands in the air. "We don't even know each other anymore." I set my phone aside and met her gaze. "Isn't that exactly how you've been acting for the past year?" Her mouth opened, but no words came. In that silence, everything shifted. Maya realized that I was done chasing a relationship she'd already stepped away from. She saw that me stopping care wasn't cruelty, it was consequence. And as she stood there, chest tight, I understood that sometimes love isn't enough to bridge a house built on uneven effort. That night, we both felt it, the hollow space between you and me growing into a chasm neither of us could ignore. Part 4. "I was right," I said, voice low and even. "Your happiness isn't my job, just like mine wasn't yours." Maya's shoulders slumped as the weight of her own declaration finally landed. She bit her lip, hesitating. "That's not what I meant," she murmured, arms wrapping around herself. I leaned back against the island, folding my arms. "Then how did you mean it?" She exhaled, gaze dropping to the floor. "I don't know." I was frustrated. "I felt like you expected too much from me." I nodded slowly, feeling a chill satisfaction. "And now that I expect nothing, you don't like it." Silence stretched tight. She couldn't argue. Inside, she recognized the truth. She hadn't wanted to be responsible for my joy until she'd seen what life looked like when I dropped mine from her to-do list. Over the next few days, the shift rippled outward. Friends noticed first. One evening, Sarah pulled Maya aside at the book club. Are you two okay? She asked quietly. Then she texted me later. Hey, is everything all right? She seems distracted. I stared at Sarah's message before typing back. We're adjusting. No further explanation, just the raw truth. Sure enough, Maya seemed to sense the tension. After dinner one night, leftover Chinese takeout. As usual, she set her chopsticks down with a gentle clack. We need to fix this, she said, voice unsteady. I looked up from my bowl, eyebrows lifted. Fix what? I asked, sip of jasmine tea in hand. The way we are, she replied, shifting in her seat. I don't like this distance. I leaned forward, elbows on the table. You mean the distance you created when you decided my happiness wasn't important? Her jaw clenched. That's not fair. A humorless chuckle escaped me. Fair? You already lost me once. You just didn't notice until I stopped chasing. Her lips parted, shock and something like fear flashing across her eyes. She had always assumed I'd be there, reaching, adjusting, fixing. Now she was the one stretching to catch up, and I wasn't sure I wanted to help. A week later, the dam broke. Maya returned from work late one night, shoulders hunched, steps heavy. I was in the living room, lights off, reading. She flicked on the hallway light and paused at the doorway. I didn't look up. She slipped inside and closed the door softly behind her. Then I heard it, a low, broken sob. I felt it deep in my chest, an echo of the helpless ache I'd carried for months. But I stayed where I was, turning a page and letting the moment unfold. She needed this, I told myself. She needed to feel the emptiness of a home no longer fueled by my devotion. The next morning, Maya was quiet at breakfast. Her eyes, rimmed red, tracked my every move as I buttered toast. She didn't mention crying. She didn't ask how I was. Instead, she searched my face for any hint that I still cared. I offered none. I wanted her to sit in that silence, to understand the gravity of her choice. This wasn't about revenge, it was about equilibrium. For years, I had carried our relationship solo. Now it was her turn. Then came the confession I'd been waiting for. That night, we were in the living room again. Maya perched on the edge of the sofa, knees together, hands clasped tight. The TV played silently. We never turned on the volume much these days. She finally spoke, voice a hushed tremor. I was wrong. My head snapped up. Excuse me. Her breath hitched. I said I don't have to make you happy. I thought you'd always be there. I thought you'd keep doing it, no matter what. But I was wrong. I felt the air shift. This was her pivotal moment. The instant she faced the damage she had wrought. She swallowed, tears pooling. I thought I didn't owe you anything, but I do. You mean everything to me. And now I'm scared it's too late. I took a slow breath, letting her words settle in the quiet room. Then I leaned back against the arm of my chair, crossing my arms deliberately. I fixed her with a steady gaze. And now that you finally realize it, I asked, voice even, what do you expect me to do? Her shoulders lifted, then fell. I just want to fix this, she whispered, eyes bright with remorse. In that moment, I knew something had changed irreversibly. She had dismantled the foundation of us with a casual declaration. Now she was trying to rebuild on shaky ground. Whether I chose to help wasn't clear. I watched her, a woman who once dismissed my happiness, stand before me, vulnerable and contrite. And for the first time since this began, I felt the scales tipping back toward balance. The choice was mine. Part 5. I let out a hollow laugh. Fix it, I repeated, voice taut. Maya flinched as though I'd slapped her with my words. You don't get to just snap your fingers and make everything right, I said, tone sharpening like broken glass. You spent years acting like I didn't matter, as if my happiness was none of your concern. And now suddenly it is. Her breath hitched. She trailed off, lips parting. I thought you'd never leave, she whispered, eyes downcast. I shook my head, slow as a turning tide. That's exactly the problem. Tears shimmered on her cheeks. What do you mean? I held her gaze, steady and unyielding. You never believed you had to try? You assumed I'd stay, no matter how miserable I was, because I always did. Her hand flew to her mouth, fingers trembling as she choked back a sob. And in that moment, a moment I once would have rushed to soften, I felt no pity, no impulse to comfort her. Because I wasn't certain everything would be okay this time. She reached for my hand, delicate fingers curling into mine. Please, she breathed. I don't want to lose you. I looked at her fingers, at that desperate grip. I wondered, did she love me? Or did she love what I provided? The constant attention, the unwavering support, the security that no matter what, I would always be there. She was mourning not just our future, but the version of me who had put her first, unquestioningly. That man was gone, and I wasn't sure I wanted him back. Maya's tears fell freely now. The same woman who once dismissed my pain as my problem was begging me to stay. Yet I wasn't the person who would plead for her love anymore. I was the person deciding whether I wanted this, whether I wanted her. I drew a breath that felt like I was pulling air through a pinhole. My heart pounded against my ribs. Then I spoke, voice low. I don't know if I can do this anymore. Her sob cut off as she stared at me, panic blooming in her eyes. You don't mean that. I met her gaze evenly. I do. Her lips trembled. But I'm here. I let out a bitter chuckle. And what happens the moment you get comfortable again? When you stop fighting as hard, and everything drifts back to how it was. She froze, face paling because we both knew this wasn't about one apology. It was about years of patterns. Me giving, her taking, me fighting to keep us alive, her shrugging off the responsibility. I'd tasted what it was like to put myself first, and I wasn't certain I could go back to being the person who placed her happiness ahead of his own. Maya shook her head, voice quivering. I can change. I swear I can. Can you? I asked, cutting her off. Her mouth parted, but no words came. Deep down, she didn't know. She wanted me to believe she could, but some fractures don't mend with promises. Some things break beyond repair. I watched her unravel. This woman who once seemed unshakable in her conviction that my joy was secondary. And as I stood there, observing her heartbreak, I realized I was already gone. Not physically. Our apartment still held both our belongings, but mentally and emotionally, I checked out long ago. Because I had discovered something I hadn't felt in years: clarity, peace, the quiet pulse of my own life, unshadowed by someone else's indifference. I stepped back, closing the distance between us just enough to let her see my resolve. She sank to the floor, sweatpants pooling around her ankles, face hidden in her hands as she sobbed. The raw vulnerability in that sound was the last rope tethering us together, and she had let go. I picked up a mug from the nearby table, its chipped rim familiar, grounding. I sipped the lukewarm coffee inside while she sat there, the room shrinking around her despair. Finally, she looked up, eyes red, pleading. Please, she whispered again. But I had nothing left to give. The man she was begging for no longer existed beneath her fingers. I set the mug down, careful not to jostle the table. Then I walked toward the door. In that moment, I wasn't running away. I was stepping into something new, into a life where my own heartbeat mattered first. She didn't call after me. I didn't look back. The end.